Hello and welcome to another episode of The Codercareer with me, Cameron Blackwood. Today's guest is Chris Blakey. Chris is a highly experienced recruiter who's worked on both sides of the Atlantic and is here to impart some knowledge from his years in the industry on how to get not just your first job, but also your second and further jobs in tech. He's also here to bust some myths and spill some truths about the differences between work culture, work-life balance, and salaries on each side of the Atlantic. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and please do join our Discord. We're growing a small little community of developers who want to invest in their own career, so please find the invite link to that in the description. And now, on with the show. Hi Chris, welcome to the Codercareer. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. Not bad. So for listeners who aren't familiar with yourself, do you want to give a bit of a background into who you are and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I have been in tech recruitment for about 10 years. Worked for quite a big UK agency for about 9. And then for the last year, I've actually run my own company called the Developer Link. So just placing software developers across both the US and the UK. I do predominantly sort of US stuff, and my business partner, Mike, who I also work with at the last company, does mainly sort of UK. And then I think we got connected because we started a thing called the Junior Developer Link as a sort of meetup and events group outside of that. So sort of like encouraging junior developers on their sort of career path, and sort of arrange monthly talks for them around sort of things that they can do to progress their career.
Cool, sounds great. Well, seeing as I think at the latest calculation, 92% of our listeners are either in the UK or US and developers with less than 3 years experience, you're pretty much bang on the kind of person that they need to listen to. So there's some good advice here, listeners, if you stay tuned for this one. Yeah, cool. So just to warm things up, I'd like to go through some quick fire questions normally, if that sounds good.
Yeah, for sure.
We can kick off with the big one is what was your first computer?
So I don't actually know. I've been racking my brain trying to think about this. I'm a Mac user sort of through and through, and I remember using, I think it was like the first ever Mac, like PC at my sort of the lady that looked after me after school when my parents were working. I remember going on there and doing very, very basic things on it. But in terms of my actual first PC, I don't know. I think it was probably a Tamagotchi more than anything else.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure.
Well, to be fair, they are technically computers. Like there, without getting too deep into a technical discussion, I think they are Turing complete. So I think a Tamagotchi is technically a computer. Yeah, that's probably the best answer I've ever had on that. Fair play. I don't think I've heard the word Tamagotchi in 15 years. That is quite stunning. And what about? This will be a very interesting question because we already talked a little bit about this off air, and you're someone that's travelled a lot. What's your favourite tech city?
So it's probably gonna have to be Austin. Like it's such a fun city. I lived in both Austin and New York over the last sort of 5 years, and New York's incredible for tech as well, but like Austin's just a different breed, and like so many companies moving there, relocating their head offices there, and then it's just full of tech people. You can't go to a bar without running into people that work in development or work in sales for these big SaaS companies. And it's basically a bunch of drunk tech people. It's the whole city.
Sounds good. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of the public policy decisions there have led to people moving from Silicon Valley over to Austin. So definitely, it's somewhere that I'm really hopefully going to visit soon at some point just to check out tech scene there. It's definitely on the bucket list for me.
Yeah. Have you heard of South by Southwest?
I have. Yeah. Have you been?
I would definitely recommend going there. Yeah, it's basically like 4 days of tech, 4 days of film, and like 4 days of music. Like it's a really, really cool event. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you're able to.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds right up my street. I've been gradually throughout COVID coming up with a list of places I want to go, and Austin is definitely up there. So hopefully, I'll have to sell the Codercareer or something, make a load of money, and then travel around all the places that I've been able to go to. And Austin would definitely be on the list.
Weirdly, Scotland's on my list. So
is it?
Yeah, I was there for about 2 hours a few years ago. Not like was there for 2 hours and then decided to leave. Like I just went and played a squash game and then had to go home.
Oh, nice.
I don't know. It's definitely like Edinburgh or Glasgow. I definitely want to go to both at some point.
Yeah, it's awesome up here. I absolutely love it, and London, as obviously people can tell from my accent, and regular listeners will know, I grew up in London despite being Scottish, and I love London. But Edinburgh's got unreal vibes, and yeah, it's a great city. I recommend it, but bring your jacket
Yeah.
and an umbrella. And what about when you're working, finding the next great developer for your client? What music do you like to listen to?
So recently we've only just moved into our first office, but like with it being the pandemic and just me and my business partner for so long, we did a mixture of working from home and working out of his garage that he converted. So we've only recently started to have an office and start to actually have input as to what people want to listen to, because I've just been so used to myself, and I would just listen to Talksport all day long because it's something that I can you kind of just chatting in the background, and like I can kind of concentrate. Like with music, I don't know why, like I get sort of like hung up on whether it's a good song or like if I want
Mm,
to change the song and stuff like that. Sometimes if I'm feeling a little bit tired, I'll put on like a bit of House Nation, but it's pretty much been exclusively heart since we moved into the office for like the last 5 or 6 weeks, which has its ups and downs. And my business partner's become a bit of a Scrooge, and every time they play a Christmas song at the moment seems to seems to kick off. But yeah, pretty much a mixture of either talk sport or heart if I'm in the office.
I have to say, and for context, because obviously this is being recorded slightly in advance, it's still November, so I'm afraid I have to agree with your business partner. It's not time for Christmas songs yet. I know what you mean about listening to Talksport can be weirdly relaxing. I quite like phoning in after a big team has lost. Phoning in. I quite like listening to the phone-ins after a big team has lost in the football because it's usually quite entertaining. If I'm on a drive, if I'm in the car driving somewhere.
I don't know what's so therapeutic about just listening to grown men argue with each other.
Yeah,
It's a strange one, but it seems to
yeah.
do the trick.
The compilations on YouTube are amazing of like grown men calling in and crying about teams losing, and there've been some cracking ones. Like I'll tell you about it off air, but there's a great Scottish one where the guy calls in and he thinks that Antti Niemi, who is a goalie for it was either Hearts or Hibs for years, he rants for about 5 minutes about why he hasn't been picked for Scotland, and they say, well, he's Finnish. And he says, "Oh no, he's not finished. He's only 26." Like, it's a great one. Anyway, um, I'm probably alienating 90% of the listener base here talking about Scottish football. But yeah, so in terms of when you are on the hunt for developers, would you say you're more of an early bird or night owl?
So I work pretty much all US roles. So I typically work from like 10 a.m. to like 10
Mm,
p.m. So pretty much night owl out of I guess just need to really to be able to get hold of people, with us being sort of 5 6 hours behind the majority of places that I'm recruiting for. But like it works for me. Like I've never been one for getting up and getting into the office for like 8:30. It was always the worst part of my job, so I quite like it. Like obviously it's a pain when someone messages me saying that they can speak after work at like 5:30, and I've got to be
yeah.
calling them at like 10:30, 11:30. But for the majority of the time, it works quite well for me.
Nice. Yeah. I've always thought that's very interesting working in a different time zone. A lot of developers end up doing that, and I've found if they're working maybe from the UK for a East Coast company. Have you found it challenging, or was it slot in all right mostly?
It's been absolutely fine. Like it's one of those weird things where I think the pandemic actually helped me conveniently from starting a business, because I had wanted to do it for a long time, and it was always my long term goal, and like I always wanted to go back to the UK. So it was something that I thought about, like, are people going to care basically that I'm in the UK and that I can't come and meet them, and like all of this kind of stuff. But obviously, like even if I was in New York, the majority of people would still want to meet over Zoom and stuff like
Mm,
that. So it doesn't really make a lot of difference. So it's kind of played to my favor, but it's not really been an issue. I think some people see contracts that I send over and see like this will be under the law of the UK, and like get a bit funny about that, and I have to change them to their law. But apart from that, people don't seem to care where you are as long as you can find them good people.
mm. That's the beauty of the technology industry, isn't it? Because people tend to have quite a global mindset about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And what about pre the recruitment days when you were a kid? What was the dream job? Did you want to be a recruiter? I because I know when I was growing up, I didn't know what a recruiter was, but I became one when I was 20.
I don't think anyone wants to be a recruiter. I think everyone falls into it that doesn't
Yeah.
know what they want to do for somewhere between a week and 10 years. Like no one actually wakes up and decides that they want to be a recruiter. But I kind of had two. So I wanted to be a policeman for
Mm.
ages, but then realised that I basically wanted to be a detective. I didn't want to be a policeman. So like, you can't really just go straight in and start
Yeah.
solving crimes. There's quite a lot that you need to do before that. And then I like all of my studying and like GCSEs and A levels and like all of that kind of stuff was to do medicine. So I really wanted to be a doctor, but it got down to applying for universities and just absolutely bottled it on the day that I was supposed to. So basically just saw myself. I was like, this is the decision. If I go this way, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Whereas like I decided that it wasn't for me and kind of took a bit of a turn and did psychology with a degree, which again you can't really do anything with apart from do another psychology degree after you finished. So ended up in recruitment.
Very nice. And now you've kind of got onto this journey where you've worked your way up and started your own business, which is really cool. And you've done that relatively quickly then, because I think you said you've been in the industry about 10 years. So, and you've been running your business for about 2 years or slightly less.
Yeah, slightly less. It was a year at the end of August. So yeah, literally just over a year. So I worked for the other company for 8 years.
Mm.
But I think it was because I went out to the US to set up their offices. So I'd had some experience of doing it sort of like from scratch. I went out with a couple of other people to Austin, which was the company's first US office, and kind of set that up. And then when I went to New York, I was actually on my own, and set that up from scratch. So I'd kind of done it twice with a lot of help and backing and things like lawyers and accountants and like all of that kind of stuff. And then it was just a case of kind of ripping yourself out from that and having to kind of learn those things on the go. But luckily, my business partner deals with the majority of the not fun stuff, so I'm still fine.
Very nice. Sounds good. And so, I to go on to more about what you do. Obviously, you're a agency recruiter in the sense that you seek
Yeah.
out candidates based off briefs from clients. For people that aren't familiar, obviously, you see a lot of CVs and that kind of thing. As the top level question, what in general makes you stand out? I know that's a super generic thing, but for a candidate, what makes them stand out to you?
Like I think I actually did a post about this a few days ago. Like the two things that always stand out to me, and bearing in mind, I'm probably looking at somewhere between like 500 and 1,000 LinkedIn profiles a day,
Hmm.
for the volume of jobs that we're working. Like it's personality is a huge thing, and then just real clarity around what you've done and what you're looking to do. And when I say personality, I don't mean like a picture of your dog wearing a hat or like anything stupid like that. I mean literally just putting your own spin on what you've done, whether that be a particular hobby that you're very interested in, or like maybe you've done a personal project that's particularly interesting, or even just something remotely funny that you can think of that you could put on your profile or on your resume. I think my favorite one I've ever seen, because I don't know if you've ever seen Anchorman. I think
Oh
the
yeah, I have. Yeah,
majority
it's
of people are,
classic. Yeah.
and the guy's put on his tagline. He was like, "I work with JavaScript, or it might be JavaScript. I'm not sure if it's a soft J." And just something like that. It really just grabs you, like, and you're then on that person's profile and you're really reading it. Whereas it can be so easy when you're looking through so many profiles to just kind of like briefly skim through. And then the other thing, like I said, is just clarity. So there's so many people that like will list 1,000 buzzwords of every tech that their company has worked on, and yeah, it means you come up in every search, and it's probably the reason why a lot of people get hit with roles that aren't right for them, because they're coming up in everyone's search. But like the people that go, I worked on this project with two other people predominantly focused on back end, working on C sharp, like real clarity around what they've actually done, is what makes it easier for me as someone that I'm not technical. I can write a tiny bit of HTML. Got to the point where I was doing CSS and gave up. So like I'm not technical enough to really be able to vet. But looking from that sort of standpoint, that's what I need to see is like how and where have you used the technologies that I'm sort of sourcing for.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think it's interesting to say people get hit with stuff that isn't relevant to them, but people are very quick to blame the recruiter for that. And yes, sometimes there are recruiters that just spray and pray. And unfortunately, a lot of times because they're very junior and they don't know any better.
Not
But
sometimes. There are a lot of
yeah,
bad recruiters. So like
yeah,
blame where blame's due. Like there are a lot of bad recruiters out there. But I think like you were saying, I'd say something crazy like 50-60% of recruiters that are sourcing jobs right now probably have less than a year's experience.
yeah.
So that's the vast majority of what is going out there. And like we as a smaller company, for example, like we pay for like each email that we send out like is
Mm,
actual money coming out of our pocket.
yeah.
Whereas if you get a message from someone who's 6 months into recruitment that's working for a large corporate that's got unlimited emails, sorry, they'll just search Java and developer like nationwide and just hit everyone, whether you're right or not. They won't look at your profile.
Mm,
Whereas we actually go through and we'll select the profiles that we want to message, and we've tried and tested a lot of different styles of InMail and stuff like that, because for us we need to cut through that level of noise. People are getting anywhere between 10 and 100 messages a day, like for some of the roles that we're recruiting for. So we have to somehow be like, hi, like we actually know what we're talking about, like we're not just another recruiter, like this is actually something that I think you'd be good for. So it's quite tough to cut through that noise
mm.
sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that, and I think I'm not just saying this because you're on the podcast, to be honest. But I actually say to people in general, if you're going to deal with an external recruiter like an agent, then it is generally better to deal with someone who's from a kind of boutique agency, because there is that attention to detail. They're much more likely to have been trained a bit more hands-on. And I think particularly the best kinds of agencies to work with are the ones where it's a small group of senior consultants who maybe left a larger one and are now striking out on their own. At least that's from what I've seen. I mean, I've been out of the recruitment game for a little while now, but it's from an outsider's perspective. That's what I can see are the most successful ones that work well. Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule, but that's the general trend I've spotted. A fewer consultants, boutique focused approach is the way to go if you want to work with a good recruiter, I find.
Yeah, for sure. I've just noticed that the first time I've done a podcast, I just keep nodding. Like I'm like, you can't hear that. But like what made you go from like out of recruitment? Did you do it for quite a while?
It's an interesting question, and something I actually often forget to go into detail on the podcast. But I did it. So I basically sampled every kind of recruitment there was. So I went to university, did a business degree, kind of was aware of what computer science was because my like one of my best mates at uni did computer science, and they were it's such a stupid story, but they were short on numbers for their football team. And I'm awful at football, so there was no chance I was making the business one. So I went to play for the computer science, like intramural football team, and
Yeah.
we were the worst team by far. But I made some good mates, so I learned a little bit about it, and I thought, well, it's probably too late to get into this. I left uni with like an overdraft. I thought tech recruitment's a good way to make some money. I did all right. I was never the best kind of agency recruiter. I didn't enjoy it that much. I thought I was I thought I was Jordan Belfort, and then I quickly realised I wasn't when it came to sales. And I realised I just quite enjoyed speaking to candidates. So I got to learn a little bit more about how everything worked under the hood. So I started teaching myself to code at night. Went and worked for a company called Talent.io, which is kind of like a smart recruitment platform. You
Yeah.
basically sign up and they select candidates for you. So kind of an agency. Then I realized I needed to take learning coding seriously. So I quit, went out as a day rate contractor as a recruiter, and managed to basically negotiate a deal where I was working as a recruiter for a startup for 4 days a week and then interning as a software engineer 1 day a week. And
Oh,
then
cool.
finally, via a React course, I ended up becoming a software engineer. So it's a bit convoluted, but yeah, it's a bit like it's very much like recruitment in that most developers don't have a very clear story about how they actually ended up doing it, especially if they don't have a computer science degree, obviously. But yeah, that's how I ended up where I am.
Yeah, for sure. Apart from the fact that there was no one out there that's gone and paid for a 12-week boot camp to get into recruitment, like that's not a thing. Although maybe it should be.
Yeah, I think to be fair, it. I mean, probably more so that companies would pay for it, but definitely ones with a structured training program would be good, judging by some of the emails I get from people that have clearly just been let loose with 100 credits. But yeah, I mean, boot camps are a funny one. Like I went to a kind of modified one that was just you already kind of had to know how to code and just learn React, but yeah, I am always a little bit puzzled by people that literally have never written a line of code and go straight into a boot camp. I always think that's quite brave, but yeah, it is. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Everyone's got a different story how to get into. Well, everyone's got a different story about how they got into recruitment, but software engineering as well. But yeah, I mean, I've always worked in the UK for tech. I've worked more internationally recruiting. Have you found there's a big difference in the tech scene between the UK and US? Because I only ever did continental Europe. I never really did anything in the States.
The salaries are nuts for
Yeah.
one. Like, and I think one of the worst things that I've seen is a lot of companies from the UK going to the US just try and convert their salary in the
Mm,
UK into dollars, and like it just doesn't equate. And I think that's why the majority of like recruitment companies are opening up in the US because of the size of the fees. Because they're obviously able to, there's less competition, so they're able to charge a higher percentage of a higher salary. So the size of the placements that we were doing out in the US are sort of 3-4 times what we would do in the UK. And that's mainly down to the salaries. Like someone with sort of 3-4 years experience in the UK, you're looking at what, like somewhere between 30 and 50, depending on the company and the
mm.
tech stack. Whereas like out there, you're looking anywhere between 120 to like 160, 170. It's just absolutely nuts.
Yeah, lower taxes in a lot of states as well. Particularly, I mean, we were talking about Austin earlier. Texas, I think, has got very low income tax, hasn't it?
Yeah, and then obviously the majority of companies are there for the fact that there's no corporation tax either.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a pretty good setup if you can get it. Do you find the in terms of the work life balance? A lot of the time, people say that the work is it's much more like there's less culture of a work life balance in the states. Would you say that's fair compared to UK, or is it exaggerated?
I don't really know. Like I think there's a lot less holiday or vacation days. Like it's crazy the amount of vacation days that some people have. Like the average is like 10 or something. So you see around, for example, today's actually Thanksgiving. So everyone, because they've got that day off, and they've got so little holiday, everyone will also be off tomorrow, and some of them will be off Wednesday because they really want to maximize that time off because they get so few days. And then a lot of it with work events as well. Like work events will be over a weekend with like family, and people will go take their family to like a work event over a weekend. Whereas like in the UK, like you would not be seen outside of like the hours of 9 till 5 Monday through Friday. You would not be seen with anyone, like you wouldn't be with your manager at a retreat in anywhere in the UK over a weekend. Whereas like in the US, it seems quite common that they'll go to Vegas with their family and be there for a conference all weekend. It's quite a strange one. So I don't know whether they're more attached to their working lives or they're more sort of like intertwined, but I definitely think there are some differences there for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting, and I think we talked about corporate life a little bit there, and I mean this doesn't really pertain to either the US or the UK. It's just generally. I've got my own opinions on this, but I don't want to reveal them until what you say. So I'm curious now. When it comes to junior candidates, someone wants their first or second job. Would you say they should go for a startup, medium-sized enterprise of maybe 100 developers, or go full corporate, like work for a consulting firm or a bank or something?
So I think there's pros and cons to all of them. I think probably like an SME is probably the best bet, or like the like later stage startup. The issue I've got with corporate is the fact that you can get lost in the corporate
Mm,
ladder of, right, you have to be a junior for the next 2 years, and then you'll get promoted to like mid, or like whatever, like, or like software engineer two, or like whatever it is on their scale. You will do it on their timelines. And also you can get stuck in that if you did want to go to a startup further down the line. Like, I specifically get told that they don't want people from large corporates because they won't
mm,
be able to work in a startup environment. And also it's just kind of known that, or at least they think they know, that someone that works in a large corporate is only doing a very, very small part of whatever they're doing, like a very small cog in a wheel, whereas they view people that work in startups and SMEs as more well-rounded and better at kind of picking stuff up that might be slightly outside their job description and all of that kind of stuff. Um, from a startup perspective, like, you could be, I don't know, like lead dev within like a couple of years, and it could be brilliant, but also like they might never have hired a junior before. They might have no training. Like, they might basically just need someone to do what is essentially dog work for someone else that doesn't want to do it, and they might just think, oh, like this is cheap to hire a junior, like maybe it'll work out. Like, my first sales job, it's not on my LinkedIn because it was horrendous, but like I got brought into this large software company, and they'd never hired entry level salespeople before, but they did like a what's the TV program, apprentice style sort of like assessment day. They hired like 6 grads, and they were basically like, we can pay these guys like 30 or 40 grand a year, like, which would be good for them, but so much cheaper than hiring senior salespeople. And we'll be able to get 6 people that are really bought in, really talented, blah blah blah. We all left within 6 months. Like, I lasted, I think, maybe 3 or 4, like, and everyone just teetered off because they had no training plan in place. They had no actual structure. So we were reporting dotted into like 3 different people, and one person would say, this is the way that you sell, and like that, another person would be like, why are you doing it that way? And there was just no structure. So we were set up to fail, like, right from the start. Which is what I would imagine a lot of startups can be like. They think that hiring a junior is a great idea, but if they've got no way of training them or anything like that, they'll actually be a drain on the team that they already have there, if anything. So, like, again, as much opportunity as there is in a startup, I would avoid the very, very small ones if they haven't hired juniors before, which is where I think SMEs sort of come in. But like, I think it overall comes down to the person, because like corporate will have some of the best training from like probably almost like an academy to like turn up to, and they'll
yeah.
have your first 30, 60, 90 days like so planned out, and you might not actually write any useful code for your first like 3 to 6 months because you might be being trained. So it depends what you kind of want from a company more than anything else, whether you want sort of opportunity to grow and take tasks on, or whether you want real structured formal training. So, which is why I think sort of like SMEs that have hired juniors in the past are probably the best way to go, and sort
Mm.
of best of both worlds.
Yeah, I'm definitely inclined to agree. I think if you can get to the point where you're in an established sort of squad structure, if you're working like agile, where you've maybe got a senior dev to like pair up with and that kind of thing. What you don't want with a startup, obviously for the reasons you mentioned already, in the sense that you might just be hired as a more senior person but on a cheaper salary. The other thing as well is one of the best ways to learn as a developer is to work on an existing code base and just make small fixes. The problem is with a startup, you're like building greenfield stuff, which for me now, at my point in my career, now that I'm sort of at that mid-level, that's like a bonus. I actually really prefer building my greenfield stuff because I don't
Yeah.
have to deal with someone else's code that they wrote 5 years ago and have left the company. Whereas when I started my career, I would have really struggled with greenfield because it's like, how do I build this solution? And you learn about design patterns and solutions just from working on other people's code and
Yeah.
learning from there. So it's quite a nice way of informally be structured. But yeah, it's kind of down to your risk tolerance as well. Like if you back yourself and you're willing to put in some hard hours, then a startup can be the best thing. But yeah, I'm inclined to agree that it's probably best to go SME, or if you want that rigorous structured training, then definitely corporate, like especially if you get into like a FANG company, or I suppose the acronym has probably changed now that Facebook's changed their
Mang
name to
now, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
Mang. I don't like that as much. If
Not
you can get
quite so
into
catchy.
if you can get into a Mang company, then it's generally a good idea just to have that on your CV anyway, from your first job. But yeah, for sure. And so we talked about duration of recruiting into the industry. You've been doing it for around a decade now. How's the culture shifted, and what changes have you noticed in the scene, both in the UK and the US?
So like obviously like tech continues to evolve consistently, and like when I started, everyone wanted PHP developers. Like absolutely everyone needed PHP
That
developers.
is a big
There,
change.
there was yeah, it was all like Laravel and Symfony and like all of these frameworks, and like that
Yeah,
was all anyone wanted. And then a few years ago, it was like everyone needed Ruby on Rails developers, and everyone was doing boot camps for Ruby on Rails, and like every startup was using Ruby on Rails. Now every single company wants JavaScript developers. Like, so it goes in waves, and things are so popular. But then they kind of seem to disappear a little bit. But I think the biggest thing that's obviously changed most recently is the like evolution of remote working, and companies that have adapted to it. Like everyone obviously had to do it over the last couple of years, but the companies that have embraced it are going to be the ones that succeed. Like there's so many companies. Like I get countless calls and messages from people that have been forced to work remotely for the last 18 months. Now all of a sudden their company's like, right, you've got to come back into the office. So like unless you can like prove that this person couldn't do their job from home, because I think that was always the thing. Like I always wanted to work remotely in my last job, but like you didn't have the tools to be able to do it, whereas
mm,
every company had to adapt so people could work from home. Like if they couldn't work from home, they would not have been working there for the last 18 months. They would have been fired. So they've obviously done a good enough job. Like I don't understand why they then force people to come back into the office when it's been proven that they can do that. And some companies are even like you have to come in 1 day a week or 5 days a month or something like that. Those days aren't even coordinated with other people.
yeah,
So people are going in and sitting on Zoom with people that are at home by themselves in the office. Like, what's the point?
yeah.
It
It's
just doesn't make
ridiculous.
any sense.
Yeah, I think I have a requirement in my current one in my contract to come to Birmingham. So I live in Edinburgh, go to Birmingham once every 3 months, but it hasn't actually happened yet, and I've been here over 6 months. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is just so much easier. Have you noticed the effect of the Great Resignation, as they're calling it?
Yeah, like there's so many people that have been looking for work, and like I think the market has gone a little bit crazy over the last sort of few weeks, and people are getting paid 20-30% more than what realistically they should be, just due to the competitiveness of it. Companies are counter offering with almost what I'd consider like danger money for like people to actually stay. So I'm interested to see what happens in 6 to 12 months when someone's got a 50% uplift on their salary and they're still probably doing the same amount of work, whether they're going to end up keeping everyone. But yeah, the amount of money that's being thrown around to both keep people and to tempt people away is crazy.
Yeah, because the effect in the UK has been. I've never seen it so busy, but I've heard in the US it's like 10 times crazier than how it is here in terms of the competition.
And the other thing as well is like everyone's gone from, I don't know, living in Basingstoke and having like companies
Mm,
within like a 45-minute drive as their only options, to the whole of the UK, or even like tapping into Europe. You think like someone used to have to work in Alabama, like, and they had like four tech companies there, like, and now they can speak to companies in, like you said, every time zone, every state in the US, that are all happy to hire remotely. So their ability and their number of options has just gone through the roof. So that they can sit there and be like, well, if you don't want to pay me that, like someone will. Like
yeah,
it's absolutely nuts.
it's a good thing for society, I think. The remote work kind of push. Like I've noticed that a lot of US. I've heard about a lot of US like smaller rural counties have been giving tax incentives for remote tech workers to move there if there's not many jobs, just because of local economics. If you can get money into local economy via remote workers, it's a great way to go, and it provides jobs for people maybe in deindustrialized areas and that sort of thing. So I think over the next 10 years, I'm pretty sure there'll be a positive effect. Worldwide, we'll see greater economic equality. At least I hope, as in a regional inequality. That's the word I'm looking for. I hope that'll happen.
How do you feel about, I guess, remote working salaries being adjusted to where people are living? Like everyone seems to have an opinion one way or another, and every client is either like they're either outwardly saying we will pay you the same no matter where you live, or they're outwardly saying why would we pay you a New York salary if you live in the middle of nowhere? Like what do you kind of think?
The way I see it is I I do actually have some increased expenses from being at home, working at home, compared to how I would be otherwise. But I don't mind taking a slight pay cut. Like I could probably get paid more if I worked in a London-based company, but I just know even just my rent is just so much cheaper here, and I live in like the centre of Edinburgh. It's worth it for me, but like not anything more than like 5%. And I think that's kind of the beauty of the free market in that I kind of don't have to make that decision. The company's going to make it for me.
Yeah,
And in terms of moral question, I'm not really bothered if a company wants to pay me slightly less if I live outside the M25, because I just know the money that I save is worth it. And if all companies are going to do that, then that's fine, because if you can save, like I reckon my living costs are 30% cheaper being up here versus in London.
yeah,
So a 5% pay cut means nothing in that respect. So it doesn't bother me that much. I understand why some people are upset, like especially if they've been told you have to take a pay cut, which hasn't happened to me. Like if you have like a mortgage and that sort of thing that's conditional on your salary, I understand when people are upset by it. But yeah, I'm not overly bothered about it in that respect. Like because there are you're being given compensation for a reason, and like transport and housing in London is so expensive. So
yeah, for sure.
I understand. Yeah. And would you say, I mean, going back to junior developers, and obviously what you're working on as well with your series of events, I guess a lot of the theme of it is standing out. Do you think there's any really underrated skills or assets, either technical or non-technical, that juniors can have in this competitive market? Because unfortunately, the job market is great for everyone apart from entry-level developers.
Yeah. For sure. Well, I think it's one of those things. Like, you say it's not a good market for junior and entry level developers, but it will become one because like once it gets to the point where like no one is looking at a mid and senior level, like that's the only place that people can go,
Mm,
will be juniors, and like obviously they're gonna have to hire them at some point. But like I think the biggest underrated things, like first of all, like it's just being honest about what people know and what they don't, and just being super willing, super eager to go and learn whatever they don't. I think people try and over embellish like their abilities and all of this kind of stuff, and I think the honesty of, particularly in interviews, I've seen people and heard of people try and muddle their way through and just sort of like, oh no, I know enough about it because like you've half read about it. Whereas if people go in and they're like, I'm very interested in it, but I don't know anything about it, like would that be something that I would get exposure to here? Like that answer versus trying to give a like something that you read 4 years ago that you can't really quite remember, like that answer is always going to put you in better stead. So like being real honest about it. And I've seen people struggle on a technical test or something like that, or struggle on a question, go away and like research it and then send up a follow-up answer of like, sorry, you kind of blindsided me on that. I went away, looked at it. Here's what I would have done. And companies are literally like, well, the only thing I need from a junior is them to do that on a day-to-day basis. We're not expecting them to know everything. Like we're expecting them to have passion about what they're doing and the ability to go away and like learn new things. That's all they're looking at. So that the fact that you would be willing to do that for someone that you've interviewed with or during your first few weeks on the job, like I would always say, don't know, let me go look at it. Rather than being like, yeah, no, I know that, and digging yourself a hole. Like, I
mm.
just don't think it's ever possible. And then the other thing I think is like obviously personality, but that's much harder to work on.
Yeah, that's true. I think, yeah, and taking notes during the interview as well is also a good thing to do, because it shows that you're receptive. And And obviously, it's good to ask permission that you can take some notes. And I totally agree with what you said about following up afterwards. Like, it just creates a good impression, shows that you listen, shows that you're proactive, and you'll go out and research by yourself. I think people sometimes get a bit, not mean to stereotype about developers, but we tend to be more introverted and less keen to like reach out, maybe. And I think people get a bit intimidated to reach out to a hiring manager and just explain, what happened, like their answers, and clarifying in an interview, or even just to say thank you for the interview.
Yeah.
Um, it's something that like the hiring manager is only going to appreciate that. I have noticed a weird trend where people have been publicly posting on their LinkedIn saying, I had a great interview today with XYZ company. Don't do that, because
Yeah.
one, it's the job post might be confidential, and two, everyone else is now going to apply for that job. So you're
Yeah.
kind of doing yourself in a little bit. But yeah, it's don't be afraid to reach out to a hiring manager. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like you said, people don't do it enough, but like you don't even need to do it directly. If you're working with a recruiter, you can send them a follow up or stuff like that. But like freezing on the spot during an interview is very, very common. Like I think for in any industry, but going away and looking at it and showing what you would have done, like 9 times out of 10, people think that an interview or like a process is done because like a car crash question or like they bomb a technical test or something like that. There's normally a way around it, like, and people want to hire you. Like, no, there's the odd company that like I didn't work with them, but I spoke to one in New York that they were very proud about the fact that 97% of people failed their tech test, and I was like, what is the point? Like, but like the majority of people, they're desperate to hire you, so like they'll be just as disappointed, if not more disappointed than you are, that interview has not gone well. And it could literally just be a case of going away, researching something, and sending a follow up email. They'll be like, "Well, that's awesome. They obviously just had a bit of a brain freeze. Like they do know it, and they've gone away and looked at it. This is exactly what they would have done, like on their day to day. Like, and that can be the difference between obviously landing it and not landing it.
Yeah, exactly. And even going so far as building some small project in that company's tech stack or something like that, just to show what you can do, show that you've researched something, is always a good thing. Like if there's a tool that's been brought up to you that you didn't know anything about, then just going away and researching it. Like, I hate to blow my own trumpet, but it's just the first example that's come to my head. My second dev job, which I'd only actually been an experienced developer for 8 weeks, because I got made redundant with my first dev job. It's a long story. But after that, I was interviewing, and the job that I liked the most was using Angular, which I'd never used before. And I went away and I did a 8 hour course on it. And I think it was that was the kind of, I'm not saying go and study it for 8 hours. That was a bit excessive. But I think it was that sort of thing that maybe pushed me over the line relative to other candidates. And if you can just display your enthusiasm for learning a new tool, then you're just going to stand out, because it's amazing how many people are actually very passive, even as an entry level developer.
Yeah.
They know what they know, and they don't want to kind of do anything else.
I think, like we were saying before, like even over the last like 10 years, like tech shifted so much from PHP to Rails to like obviously JavaScript as being the hottest thing at the moment. Like it doesn't really matter what you know at that moment in time. Most of it is like, can you go and pick up new things? Like especially as a junior, but for anyone, like you will be outdated at some point if you can't go and pick up new things.
Got to roll the punches. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, like how experienced you are. Like, I'm not the most senior engineer in the world. I'm a mid-level developer, but I'm learning new stuff all the time. Like, I'm trying to get better at back-end stuff, DevOps, learning about Web3 technologies at the moment. Like, you've always got to stay busy and keep stimulated.
One of the best tips I actually got for sort of like Zoom interviews as well was like you said, if you're doing a bit of research before your interview, it's actually with one of the talks we did with Zigo. They said write like post-it notes about what you've researched and like literally stick them around your screen, so that you can refer to it throughout. Like, and that was coming from a hiring manager that was looking to hire juniors. He was just like, why would you not have them there and ready and stuff to reference? And that could be, oh, I see you worked with so and so at this company. I know them. Or it might be, oh, like you said, I saw that you're working on this. I did some research. It looks really interesting. Like just having little things like that for for inevitable sort of like, you don't want to get to the end of a call and be like, oh, I wish I brought up
Yeah.
like this thing. So like having stuff like that ready is not like, some people think it's considered like cheating, I think, to be like that prepared. And like I even have it with like so many tech tests that companies send out, like they don't put in the thing whether you can use Google or not. Like nine times out of 10 you can use Google because you were doing your job, but 9 times out of 10 people don't use Google because they think it's a test and they shouldn't, and that would be cheating. And
Yeah.
like people just end up failing stuff where they would easily pass them because they can't
Yeah.
remember one thing that they could Google in 5 seconds.
The most important skill about being a developer is learning how to Google. Like,
Yeah,
honestly, like you can't expect everything to be in your head the whole time. Like the syntax and stuff. Like there's so many things going on. Like I honestly, if I let me go on now. Like I'll go on my other browser. I've got at least 14 tabs about authentication services. Like easily, they're all Stack Overflow ones. Like
yeah,
it's just so inconsequential. Like you need to know how to Google. So definitely don't be ashamed of Googling. And the one time I'd say is don't Google is maybe on a phone interview with a hiring manager. Don't Google because it's really obvious when you're typing your answer.
yeah,
When you're typing it, if they say, oh, why is Next.js good for a front end? And they hear you furiously typing away, like they know what's
yeah.
going on. It's better to say I'm not sure, but I'll find out, and then we loop back to what we were saying earlier. But yeah, it's there's a lot of things you can do, and I think generally the theme of being proactive rather than passive is just the best way of being a junior developer. And in terms of what you're running at the moment with the junior developer link, do you want to say a bit more about that and the events you have running as well?
Yeah, for sure. So we're doing sort of one a month, and they're all aimed at kind of entry level juniors, grads, and people that are like kind of within their first dev job. And we've had anything from sort of like engineering leaders to heads of talent, to a couple with sort of juniors that have recently started and stuff like that talk about their stories. And the next one that we're doing in a couple of weeks is actually with a guy that had decided to join a, when you were saying about different sizes of companies to join and stuff like that. He decided to join a startup, not like a sort of one man band, but a much smaller company. And he's actually a lead on a particular project at the moment. And like it's a really interesting thing. And like it's nice to be able to look at someone in a junior role and be like, oh, well, I'm not just going to be doing, like we said, sort of dog work. You could be doing important work within like sort of a matter of months at some of these companies. And I think it's going to be quite a relatable thing. The last one that we did was sort of on interviewing and how to sort of interview the company as well as you. So it basically started from, I spoke to so many juniors and had so many juniors apply to my roles as a recruiter. I like probably 1 out of 100 roles that I work on is a junior role, because people can find them themselves. They don't want to pay me for a fee for something that they could put an advert out and get a load of people and they just have to screen through. Doesn't mean that we don't ever work on them, but I just never was. And I realized that I didn't have anything to offer these juniors, but I had such a good network from working in the industry for 10 years. I was like, what if I connected just the juniors that are applying to my jobs with some of the people that I know in my network for an hour a month and give them a bit of their time, like they'll be able to get a lot of advice from them, like more than I could give. So we did a Q&A, literally just me and my business partner, and then we were like, we should probably get someone that knows more than more than we do on for the next Q&A. And it's just kind of gone from there. And now we've got to the point, we've probably only done 10, but now I have people reaching out to me to be like, I've seen this, we'd quite like to do one as a company. We're looking at doing some potential in-person ones next year, like potentially one in London, potentially one in New York. And it's really exciting, and it's a good group. You see people come back each and every month, and then there's always new people as well. But yeah, like I'll send you some links and stuff to the group, and obviously keep you posted on sort of future events and stuff if anyone listening obviously wants to join.
Yeah, that sounds great. And all those links will be in the description of the podcast, because it's definitely always worth getting all the advice you can. And also, you never know who you're going to meet at an event, especially an in-person one. Like one of my guests recently, she got a job at our current company through just meeting someone at a meetup who turned out to be our director of engineering. So
Oh, cool.
it's one of those things. It's a great place to network, learn new things, and have a laugh as well. So it's that sounds really great. And I also think as well, it's a great strategy as well to get really good branding around yourself as well, because people know you're the kind of person to go to in the future when they're looking for the kind of jobs that people are more likely to use a recruiter for. So well done on that. I think that's an awesome idea and a great way to do a win-win. So that sounds
Oh
really
yeah,
cool.
it's not 100% selfless. Trust me. We are hoping, and we have got some business by doing it. Like you said, a junior has a good like time at an event, and that agency is looking for a recruiter. Like we're hoping that we're going to be the one that ends up getting recommended. But also they're enjoyable. Like I've never really done anything like it before, but like chatting to yourself, like chatting to other people within the industry, it's just nice to talk about what you do as like you've built your life around your job, haven't you? And
Yeah.
kind of you everyone's got their story and wants to help people, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of those people that are maybe slightly more experienced and looking to take the next step in their career, are you looking for any particular kind of profiles at the moment for people to reach out to you,
Yeah,
both in the UK and US?
all of them. Any dev anywhere. No, like literally, we've got all manner of like both on-site and remote jobs all across the US, all across the UK. So yeah, like obviously, I'll give you my email as well. Like if you're looking for any job at all, within development or engineering, like feel free to drop us your CV or your resume, and I'm sure we'll have something.
Sounds good. And as we were saying, the market has not been hotter in a long time. So if you are thinking of moving on, it's a good time to do it. So I encourage you to reach out. But yeah, I think that kind of brings us towards the end of the podcast, actually. And I think we've had a ton of great insight from yourself. So I really want to thank you for coming on, Chris. It's been a really great episode.
No, thank you, mate. Really appreciate it. Happy to do it.
Cool, good stuff. Well, I guess happy Thanksgiving. It feels weird, Brit to Brit, saying that, and also the fact this podcast is probably releasing in mid-December. But yeah, and yeah, thanks again for coming on, and thanks as well to all the listeners. Please check out the Coded Career and follow us on LinkedIn for an exciting announcement, probably Q1, Q2 next year. But we're going to try and get ourselves more embedded in the ecosystem of helping you get that first or second job in tech. So keep your ear to the ground for more. But thanks again for listening to the Coded Career. Have a great week.